Hello, I'm Susanna Vet, and this is Alternate Perspective. This show is about all things alternative and community-driven. We bring people of different alternative, spiritual, counterculture, and activist perspectives and give them an opportunity to talk about what they do. And today we're with Tania Israel, and she will talk about bisexual awareness. How are you?
I'm just fine. How are you?
I'm good. I know I've been to one of your bylaws, which you created and brought to the community, and so I'm interested in how that came to be.
Sure. I'll start by saying that I'm bisexual. I've identified as bisexual for over 25 years, and I'm a researcher. I'm a professor at UCSB, and I had done a little bit of research on bisexuality over the years. Most of my research is broadly on LGBT communities, but I had done some specific stuff on bisexuality. But then a few years ago, I did a TED Talk on bisexuality at TEDx UCLA. And so that was up online, and suddenly I was a visible national expert on bisexuality.
Oh, wow.
I know, there was a shift there where suddenly people were asking me to do more things around bisexuality. And as part of that, one of the super exciting things about it was that I got invited to the White House Bisexual Community Policy Briefing, which was the first time that there ever was one of those. It was during the Obama administration. And so I went to that, and there were about 100 bisexual activists, advocates, researchers, community members from across the country who were gathering there at the White House. And so we talked about policy issues, and that was really amazing. And that was part of Bisexual Awareness Week. And then toward the end of that week, I was invited to a campus to give a talk there, and in addition to the talk, they decided to have a dinner where they would invite non-monosexual students to come and attend a dinner together. And it was the first time that most of these students had even met each other or were aware of all the other non-monosexual students on campus. And being part of that community at the beginning and at the end of the week in different places, I thought, I have to bring this back home. Like there's not a visible bisexual community in Santa Barbara. And so I felt like it was incumbent on me to do something about that, because I was getting to benefit from having all these, connections with bisexual people. Okay. So a friend of mine and I, we got together and we decided that we would start this group that we named Biologue, that would be a discussion group for bisexual. Dialogue? Yeah, a little bit of a play on dialogue. Yeah, and so we started meeting, and it's been meeting ever since then for the last couple of years.
All right. Do you currently coordinate the Biologue, or someone else coordinates it, or what's going on with that one?
Yeah, so I was coordinating at the beginning and then kind of handed it off to other people who have been doing it. So we meet once a month now, and it's a very sort of informal kind of discussion. It's not, like a structured educational event or something, so that people can just show up and get to talk to other bisexual people.
That's good. And I think you were the one who actually told me about how bisexuals actually get affected with mental illness issues because they are unable to express to their family that they're bisexual, but unable to even tell their community that they're bisexual. So I'm guessing this group also helps give that community where you feel like you can express yourself and help with that.
One of the things that's really challenging for bisexual people is that they don't have a lot of visibility, because people assume their sexual orientation based on the partner who they're with or the last partner that they were with, and people usually assume that someone's monosexual, and so bisexual people have to make a special effort to be visible. I actually have cards that say on them that I'm bisexual, because otherwise, no one is going to think that I am. So, except that I'm dressed like the bisexual flag today and many other days. But aside from that, who would know that I'm bisexual? Yeah. So it's really a challenge for bisexual people to find support and community. Their sexual orientation is really invalidated by a lot of people, and the heterosexual people, they're not accepted by. But even the lesbian and gay community is not accepting of bisexual people necessarily. And so it can be difficult for bisexual people to find that sense of community. And then there's, all of these mental health issues that come with that kind kind of isolation and also the negativity that people really pile onto bisexual people, the negative messages bisexual people hear about themselves.
And so what are those negative messages, if I can ask, if you're willing to tell me?
Right, but then everyone has to listen to them and they'll be exposed to them once again through television. But so bisexual people hear that bisexuality doesn't exist. You know, people talk about it as it's like a unicorn, like everyone always talks about them, but who's ever actually seen one, you know? So so people say that about bisexual people. People say, oh, people are just trying to be cool by saying that they're bisexual, they're just trying to get attention. Or they say, you know, it's not really a stable identity, that people will identify as bisexual and then later they'll come out as lesbian or gay. But in reality, like that happens sometimes, but sometimes also people identify as lesbian or gay and then they come out as bisexual, or people just initially come out as bisexual and stay that way. So there's lots of different ways that it plays out, but there's a lot of misunderstanding about bisexuality because of those kinds of messages.
Okay. And do you feel that there needs to be more of a conversation about bisexuality for those things to be, I guess, reinterpreted?
I feel like there needs to be a conversation about it, but also people really need to pay attention to their own bi-negativity, you know, like heterosexual people, lesbian and gay people, so monosexual people, I would say, need to be aware of when they are negative about bisexuals, because it's amazing that I can tell people over and over again, you know, that all of these things that they say about bisexuals aren't true, but people, it actually challenges people's understanding of themselves and of relationships and all kinds of things, just the existence of bisexuality. And so it's hard for people to take that in. So it's important to have conversation, but honestly, like, it's important for monosexual people to educate themselves so that bisexual people don't have to be having this conversation to justify their very existence.
Okay. All right. And how would you go about encouraging that? That's a good question.
Yeah, sure. So how can people learn more about bisexuality? So there's some really good resources. One of the best, I think, is the Bisexual Resource Center. It's located in Boston, but they have a lot of information online, and so people can educate themselves. They can, parents can learn more, friends can learn more, partners also. Some people are in relationships with bisexual people and don't even know it because their partner doesn't feel comfortable coming out to them. So it's really important for people to understand and be accepting of bisexuals, because they may not even know that there are bisexual people in their lives who they could be supporting better.
Okay. No, like I know it has happened to me where I do identify as queer, and because I don't really like identifying as gay or lesbian or those terms, because I feel my sexuality can be very fluid. And so that's why I identify as queer, but for a long time I either was really identified with being heterosexual because I didn't want to come out of the closet, and then when I did, I identified as gay because I didn't want to deal with the stigma.
Sure, and that's really common. I would say that's really common. So when people are like, oh, you know, bisexuality is not a stable identity, well, maybe if people were more accepting of bisexuality, then people would embrace that identity and feel like they could stick with it. Because I know, you know, depending on the gender of the person I've been in a relationship with, people will make assumptions about my sexual orientation. And so I always have to speak up about it.
Yeah, and I guess it's just inherently kind of just rude to assume someone's sexuality in general, or put your input about anyone's sexuality, period, because it's not really their business.
Well, and even, you know, when, like, I always encourage people to, like, not only want to know what someone's sexual orientation is, but then say, oh, and what does that mean to you? Because different people can mean different things by the label that they choose. So I think it's it's an interesting conversation to have, to see how somebody comes to, like, if this, you know, someone says they're heterosexual, you know, I'd say, oh, well, what does that mean to you? And
that's true.
That makes for a more interesting conversation, I think.
That's very true. And on speaking labels, because I know I'm not, there's many different people in the community who have different opinions on this. Some people think that the labels are too much, and then some people think the labels are needed to explain themselves. How do you feel about that?
So I actually did write a piece a number of years ago called Conversations, Not Categories, because of that kind of complexity that we need to have those conversations to fully express who we are. And at the same time, I feel like the labels are important on a visibility level in a way. So if I said, oh, it's really complex and I need to have a conversation with you to explain my sexual orientation, then because bisexuality is so invisible, it maintains that invisibility of bisexuality. So I feel like it's particularly important if you're part of a particularly marginalized or invisible group to have a label that you can embrace if you choose to.
Okay. Okay, this is like my own question. Like, I know there's the whole labels and needing to label, to just express one's sexuality and be, I guess, exposed or visible. Would visibility also happen if we just talked about more about sexual fluidity or sexual flexibility better, instead of having the labels?
So I don't know that we need to do it instead of having labels. I mean, I think it is important that we talk about sexual fluidity.
Thank you.
And then we say it, fluidity.
Yes. And not get tongue twisted.
So because that's a thing. The idea that we have to say people are born this way and they stay this way their entire lives in terms of their sexual orientation, I feel like that's an argument that people felt like they needed to make in order to get rights for LGBT people, to say, you know, we're born this way and that stays this way, and that's just like other kinds of groups that have fought for their civil rights. And that's true for some people, but it's not true for everybody. Sometimes people's sexuality can change over their lifetime, and that's what fluidity is about. I'm just going to say, just because sexual orientation can change doesn't mean you can change it. So it doesn't mean that, you know, you can have, like, you can go to therapy and then they'll change your sexual orientation. But sexual orientation can change over time. And so it is important to have an understanding of fluidity, as well as the fact that some people don't have fluidity in their sexual orientation. And it's also, I think, helpful to have labels and descriptors and whatever people need to express themselves. You know, I hear people say, oh, well, don't we really just want to be at a point where there aren't any labels and where nobody has like a sexual orientation label? Yes, and that will be great. And as soon as all sexual orientations are equally embraced and, you know, and people view them in equally positive ways, then sure, we can do that. And I can't wait for that day.
Well, like right now, they need to be out there and explained and informed. So I get it. The labels help create the space for the people who don't feel they have that space. Yeah. And then it allows also room to explain the flexibility of sexuality and the complicatedness that it is.
Sure.
So I guess a good question from here is, how do you feel about people who go the opposite end, dealing with labels and sexual flexibility and all of that, and they say that everyone's bisexual? How do you feel about that one?
Well, I just don't know that that's true.
Yeah.
So it's a funny thing where people say, oh, you're bisexual? Oh, yes, I think everyone's bisexual, which in some way is like they're saying it's sort of a natural thing, which, you know, or a positive thing, so that's kind of nice. But at the same time, it doesn't acknowledge the unique experiences of bisexual people and the ways that they're treated differently in society and need specific kinds of support because of that. So it's an interesting perspective, and I don't know, it's not necessarily one that I feel like I need to promote, and I also don't know that it is helpful to bisexual people, or as helpful as sort of acknowledging some of the more unique experiences that they have because of the inequities in our society.
Okay, one last question. Yeah. Where in Santa Barbara could people find resources if they're bisexual to get the support they need? Of course, the Bilog is one of them, but I'm pretty sure there's other resources.
So Pacific Pride Foundation does serve the whole LGBTQ community, and so that's a place where they have counseling services and they have different kinds of groups. There's a youth group there because Biolog is just for adults 18 and over, and part of that is because the youth group at Pacific Pride Foundation is very bi-friendly, and so that's a place where we feel like youth have a place, and we just felt like adults also need a place where they could talk about bisexuality. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We will segue into our entertainment segment.
As I've told you, I am a lyricist, not a singer, but apparently the best way to share lyrics is to sing them. So here's a song I wrote about bisexuality.
All right, bring it.
There are worse things I could do than go with a boy or two. Even though the lesbians think I'm crazy to date men, I suppose it could be true, but there's worse things I could do. I could flirt with all the gals, pretend that we're the best of pals, go to the women's bar and dance, wearing skin-tight leather pants, and refuse to say I'm bi. Build my community on a lie. I could marry Mr. Right. Lay beside him every night. Keep my attractions to myself, putting women on the shelf, feigning heterosexuality, as if that could benefit me. I can be most fully me if I embrace fluidity. I don't cheat and I won't lie, so I can't deny I'm bi and what that means to me. I'm drawn to personality, not gender dichotomy.
That's a good song, and I love the lyrics. What was the song based on?
Oh, it's based on There Are Worse Things I Could Do from Greece.
Grease is always good.
Greece is the word.
Hello, I'm Suzanne, and we just came back from our segment with our entertainment segment with Tania Israel with a song dealing with bisexuality. Our next episode is going to deal with the terrific anal artist, Kat. So please stay tuned for the most interesting episode you're going to have. So toodles and noodles, and please come back.